Welcome to Beyond Gallery Walls. I'm Patric Stillman, gallerist of the Studio Door.
And I am Redin Winter, artist, and today we're going to talk about building a body of work.
So let's dig right in.
Yeah, I have lots of questions about this.
Yeah?
Yes, I do, so I'm just going to start.
Go.
So one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this is I have been looking over all of the series. I'm now in my going to my ninth year as a professional artist. And I've been looking through my series that I've done. I didn't always start with doing series. I did individual pieces, paintings here and there for like 2 years. Then I started digging into the idea of series. But you recently had like a showing here where you did this beautiful solo thing and looking over your time as an artist. And you have been speaking a lot about body of work, which made my head start spinning going, am I working in that fashion? Am I creating a body of work? So I would love to get your opinion, advice, about how best to just even start the thinking process of what a body of work truly can be and exist for an artist.
Wow, okay. It's going to be a light topic today.
Yeah.
So, I just recently had a sort of retrospective of my work, which I found really freeing because after 2 decades of working as an artist, I can kind of put that sort of series of works that I've done to bed. And I've been thinking about how I can intentionally step into the next phase of my career. And so I think it's only natural for most artists who want to sell their work to create a series of works, a body of work that has some sort of cohesiveness, not necessarily repetition, but cohesiveness, which is typically what one thinks that most galleries want from an artist, right? If they're going to be trying to sell the work, they want to know that the work has got this level of cohesion so that they can truly market it to their patrons, and the patrons have an understanding of what they're going to receive from the artist, even if they haven't seen the new works yet. Mm-hmm. So, where to start with building a body of work? You want me to talk about intention?
Yeah, I think intention would be a good place to start because for me right now, I'm sort of on this weird cusp where I think I'm building a body of work, but then I'm second guessing myself. And okay. I have a feeling a lot of artists probably do this. Mm-hmm. So in terms of intention, when you complete a series and you go to start another series, are you as an artist going, okay, I completed that, that's done. In the back of your head, are you thinking, okay, not just what do I want to explore for this next series, or are you really sort of intentionally thinking, how can I build upon what I've already worked on?
Sure. So I think that the longer that you have a regular art practice, you become less interested in exploring all the different types of media and different things that you can do, right? Because as an artist, we have thousands of, ideas, concepts, tools that we can play with. Mm-hmm. So as your regular practice develops, you find that you have a hand or a voice that's coming through the artwork. That's either about, maybe it's storytelling, there's something about the work that is conveying a message clearly to your viewer, mm-hmm. or it's about process and it's about the materials you're working with, and those materials then create a connection with the viewer. And so when I'm moving from completing one series into another, I reflect upon what's important to me as an artist. So I've already asked myself early on, what kind of artist do I want to be? what's the things that I feel I have to say to the world through my art.
Yeah.
And I just tried to touch base with myself and go, you know, where am I at with this series that ended? And how close was I to those things that I felt were important when I began it, or when I began, you know, seriously working on my art? And so I think that's a place where I start. And then I think, oh, you know, maybe I've been missing out on things. I got distracted by a certain technique, or got distracted in storytelling in a way that started to be outside of myself. And I think that a really strong body of work speaks to your individuality, your creativity.
Okay, yeah, because I'm thinking also, I know that when I complete a series, I also sort of contemplate, was it truly a success? Like, did it, whatever that question was that I had in my mind, or the thing that I wanted to explore, or the thing that I actually wanted to show or represent in the work, was it successful, truly successful at the end? Obviously, I'm not gonna be like, well, it's done, you know, not me. I'm gonna work that thing until it's, you know, dead and in the grave at that point. But, you know, truly was it successful? Do I feel like it shifted me as an artist in a more positive sphere or not, in terms of lifting me up into a, you know, my level of artistry, if you will. But I was wondering, you know, because now that I work in series, I still play on individual things, but now that I work on series and think that way, I have found with my most recent one that I'm starting right now, the questions that are sort of percolating in my head are more of thinking, maybe it's my age, but more thinking about sort of me as an artist overarching of, you know, the past 9 years, and moving into like, oh wow, I'm coming up to my 10th year now. You know, I think it's going back to those questions that you said in terms of what kind of artist I want to be now. Right. What kind of art do I want to do now? What do I think is important for me to explore as an artist?
Sure. So I can give you a personal example from my work. So that retrospective really allowed me to sort of take a look and see how my hand sort of weaved through different times in my life and different thoughts that I felt were important to communicate. And sometimes they were very personal. These were things about me expressing my identity and who I am in the world, trying to open up space for other people to have a dialogue about who they are in the world. And then there were times that I became very specific about sort of LGBTQ history, using historic figures that I wanted to sort of bring their lives and their stories to life. And so right there you can see there's two very different kinds of worlds I'm going through. They may have some connection, but as I wanted to move forward in my career and my art, I wanted to maybe tighten that up. You know, not roam so far back and forth, and get to the core of what really I want to communicate. And so as I'm moving into sort of this new phase, this new body of work, I'm really contemplating my past works, what I thought were the most successful in conveying the messages that I feel are important now. And not only the ideas, but the visual execution of my work. And say that, okay, going forward, I'm going to tighten up my messaging, tighten up my creative visual work, and really strengthen that message I want to send the world as an artist.
I think that these questions are really important for an artist to sort of ask themselves, because we are in a community here. I'm around a lot of artists, and I often hear people sort of struggle in being around people and talking about their art. And I find that if maybe that's the issue, maybe if you are struggling to sort of talk about your art, the body of work that you have, maybe it's because you haven't asked yourself the right questions or spent the time to really come up with the answers. Maybe that's actually better, and because I think that would be really helpful. I know this is sort of a side note, but that just sort of popped.
No, I
into
think
my
that's
head.
really important. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, as you can tell, I'm a very serious artist, right? I mean, in the sense that I feel this drive to have all of these thoughts and emotions and feelings that are connected to my work. Some people just have a really good time and they can, explore and communicate things with more whimsy and lightness than I do. And that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to be overly philosophical about your work. But I always think it's important that if you want to go somewhere, if you want to get somewhere, that you have a roadmap to get there, that you have some sort of plan. Otherwise, it's too easy to be distracted.
Right. It's very easy to be distracted. There have been many series I've started, and then I got to, maybe painting number 2 or number 3, and then they just are hidden in the garage somewhere now because I got distracted by something else, or especially earlier on in my years as an artist.
I think it's really challenging to create a body of work as you move through time. You have all this excitement and energy at first, and you've got these ideas and you're maybe starting to play with them, but a few weeks into it, a few months into it, it's hard to sustain that energy. It's easy to get distracted. I love art, and so I'm going to museums, I'm seeing other artists' work, and I'm like getting new ideas all the time. And that doesn't mean that they all need to be incorporated into this work I'm doing right now.
Right.
But it's hard sometimes to stay on the path.
I've done that. I've done that where I've seen something that's gotten me very excited. I'm like, well, I can work this into this series, and then it's, oh no, I got to go back. Where's the, thank goodness I work in acrylics and not oils, and cover that up because I don't know what I was thinking when I started to do that.
Sure.
Because it wasn't in alignment with what the whole purpose of the series was to begin with. So in terms of building a body of work, then do you have I have some best tips, I guess, in terms of series and things like that, but do you have some best tips in terms of either from the artist perspective or even from the gallery perspective of, because people do want to see, galleries want to see a portfolio where the things do have a similar voice, even though you may have other series that don't link into the series that you're currently wanting to have represented. But do you have best tips on?
Yeah, first I just need to step back and say something I think I say a lot. And that is, you really need to know what kind of artist you want to be and where you want to see your art go. So, are you just creating for yourself? Are you creating for a gallery who wants to sell the work? Are you trying to obtain your work to go into a museum one day? Or,
Interior design.
Interior design's a great one. Yeah, so because each of those things is going to change how you're working and what you're creating.
Yeah.
So of course, doing it for yourself, you have the most freedom. That also means the most can go astray, right? But I think that when you are thinking of selling, or thinking of a museum, or thinking of working with a designer, then their role plays a part of what you're creating. So figure that out first.
Yeah.
Yes. So best tips. I think that there's a couple things that are really important. One, I'm just going to assume that the artists that we're talking to have already created enough work that they understand their hand and that they understand this body of work they're creating. Because the first thing an emerging artist needs to do is really explore those different techniques and figure out their composition, figure out how their work lines up with their contemporaries. Art is a competitive process if you're talking about sales and longevity. So you need to know how your work stands up against those competitors. You need to know if you have something fresh to say. So that's kind of where you start. And then once you have all of that, then that's when the work really starts. And so I think it's easy to fall into patterns where you feel comfortable and you don't push yourself. And it's important to step back from what you're doing and take a serious look. Maybe review some of those initial things. How does this work look? You know, the composition. Am I really interested in seeing that fully resolved in my painting or in my sculpture? And yeah, question the work you're doing. It would be really good if you had someone like us in your life that can help to critique your work, to give a voice to the things that you're not seeing, because that can really open up things. So I'm not giving best tips really, but there's two things.
It's good practice.
Two things I think. One is, are you remaining true to the goals of your work, to that body of work, to your overarching reason for creating art? And then the second, if I can still have it in my head, is, is that message clear to the viewer? Are you putting the essential things in your work to convey those messages, or is it hidden? How can you streamline that? How can you create a visual image that's going to have the impact for the viewer? You know, if you're a writer, it would be like, how do you use like the least amount of words to convey exactly what you want to say in that sentence? You know, visual artists have to learn that as well, and how that comes out through their own hand.
I love those.
Thanks.
I love those. I think that those are helpful to me actually, now that I'm percolating about it. For me, I think you touched on something. I think it's really important in the beginnings when you're coming up with like what you want to actually work on for a series. Side note, I spent my first 2.5 years just playing. There, you know, a couple paintings maybe look like they should belong with each other, but you know, it was all over the place. And I had been a hobbyist for years and I played a lot, but when I decided to become a professional artist, in my head, not yet quite calling myself that yet, I truly played. Like, I went to more classes. I wanted a lot of techniques and tools so that I knew what I really truly wanted to do, right? Because I hadn't played for a long time. But one thing that I would say is that when you are starting a series, I do think it's really important, what you were saying, is to sort of that presence, right? Marking the presence of where you're at as like right now. Because again, as you're moving on series, some people's bodies of works or series can take years to complete, versus other people who might be very quick. You know, they might, a couple months, have 20 paintings. You guys are very lucky if you're one of those artists. But so I think it's really important to know what you as an artist are truly trying to develop and say now, not what your last series necessarily did, but now taking that knowledge and taking that information, taking the techniques, because as you were saying, you want it tightened in, but really delving into that. Because what I find that I fall into is a trapping of, oh, that series was very successful. Maybe I should do something that's similar to that, but I'm not there anymore. And so I think that's really important for me to just say to artists who are starting off with the beginnings of building a series or a body of work is that. Am I confusing you?
No, you haven't confused me yet.
Okay, good. Because I feel like I'm confused because the spinners are spinning right now and percolating because I'm thinking about my own body of work.
Well, I think that it's easy to use your own body of work to help convey the ideas that we're trying to express.
Right.
And I think one thing that's important with your work, like I was talking about conveying that message to the artist, I think for an abstract artist or for somebody who is more concerned about the materials and process, maybe that message isn't quite the same as like a figurative artist.
In terms of the story behind it, because
Right.
I am still I think of myself still as a storyteller.
Of course.
But when you're an abstract artist, it's not necessarily as in your face as perhaps a painting of a woman sitting on a chair, with a vibe of lighting. It's a different.
Right.
It's just different.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I understand that. Yeah.
So I think that it's really good that artists who are abstract, artists who are more concerned about the materials and the process, that they also still find their hand, right? There are maybe a figurative painter like Kandinsky or Franz Marc would take a color and apply an emotion to it. So whenever you saw the color blue, it meant emotion. Throughout their paintings. It might not always be obvious, but that was their intent. I think that figurative artists can do the same things with a gesture or a certain type of, technique. Or if it's about materials and it's more abstract, maybe the soft quality versus the hard quality or the jagged edges. They can also have some sort of meaning that reappear throughout that body of work that give it that cohesiveness.
So, as a gallery owner, when you say to somebody, to an artist, I would like to see your body of work, what are you expecting to see? Are you expecting to see a certain amount of obviously a hand through it all, of
Right.
course, but in terms of like the technical stuff, are you expecting to see 10, 20 paintings? Are you expecting to see...
Well, I think it's important to say that every gallery is run by a different personality. And as an artist, you need to know what that personality is. What is that gallery focusing? What's their speciality? In order to answer those questions, like a studio door gallery is often driven by exhibitions of group shows and things like that, which is a little bit different than galleries who are representing.
Right.
But if I were to consider an artist for like a spotlight feature, what I'm looking for is that cohesion that runs through the work, that I can see that that artist has put the time and effort into thinking about what they're creating, and that they have a clear message, whether that be decorative or storytelling, and that I can see that throughout the work. So I know an artist who's super excellent at figurative work in a very stunning way. A lot of the work comes across in a way that's very commercial. I don't want to say superficial, but there's not a lot of depth to it. It's a body, simply put. It's a beautiful body. But then I'll see all of a sudden some works that actually there is a meaningful story being told behind that body because of the elements placed in the background and that sort of thing, so I'm seeing that artist like sort of occasionally peeking with this like something that's coming, You know, there's something bigger coming. And that's one thing I'm looking for. I don't see the cohesion through all the work, but I do see these like moments of inspiration that are popping out, and I think it's exciting, and I want to encourage that. I want the patrons to see that, and I'm hoping, or I'm investing in the future. So that's what one of the things I'm looking at. And then I'm assuming that everything else is already there, right? The basic understanding of what good art looks like is already there. So, you know, that's got to be there before I start looking at it more seriously.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think what's fantastic about working in series and then overall in creating a body of work is being able to sort of, you know, when I do a series, I always have paintings that I think are much stronger than the other ones, and they're all part of the same series. But for some reason, that canvas just exploded. You can see it, it's popping, and it's there. And I think that versus working individually on individual paintings, what a series does allow you to do as an artist is to not repetition necessarily, but allows you sort of a little bit of that in terms of having weaker pieces, and not because you're exploring whatever it is, whether it is a color, whether it's a technique, whether it's a specific story, whether you are having a political message, whatever it is, you're exploring that in multiple ways all at the same time based off what canvas you're working on, or, you know, whatever the medium is that you're working on, sculpture, etc. It sort of allows you to deepen your practice. So I think maybe that is why gallerists and people want to sort of see a body of work, because it does present yourself in a way where you're not sort of flicking around anymore, right? And you are sort of saying, listen, I have a practice here. I am an artist, I have a practice. I am working on all of these things. This is the body of work, etc.
Yes, and I think that's a great place to sort of wrap things up.
Yeah.
So I think the challenge for anyone who's listening today is to really think about where you're going with your art. What have you said? What have you done? And what's important to you? And how can those things that are important inform your next steps? What do you think of that?
I love that. And I will say, as an artist, when you spend the time with a series and you get to the end of it, if it doesn't hit the way you wanted it to, or if it's not as successful as you wanted it to, Samuel Beckett said it best, fail better, right? Use that as a tool, as a learning tool, to just deepen that artistic practice for yourself as you're moving through this very long journey. As Patric and I have both said, it is a journey as an artist. So thank you for tuning in.
Yes, and we look forward to seeing you next time, Beyond Gallery Walls.
Bye.